The government announces the allocation plan of the latest silver bonds. Grace period for first phase of new regulations for disposable plastic products ends today. And the International Wine and Spirits Fair is coming to town early next month. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The government has announced the subscription and allocation results of the 9th batch of silver bonds for senior citizens. The final issuance amount of these silver bonds will be $55 billion. Mo Sinai reports.
The government said more than 300,000 valid applications were received for the latest batch of silver bonds, involving roughly $69.9 billion. The more than 166,000 applicants who sought 23 or fewer units will be allocated the full amounts they applied for. The remaining applicants who sought more than 23 units will need to undergo a ballot. Among them, over 23,000 applicants will be allocated one extra unit. The silver bonds carry a guaranteed annual return of 4% with the interest rate linked to inflation. Interest will be issued every 6 months. The bonds will be issued on Wednesday. Financial Secretary Paul Chan said the positive response in the subscription shows silver bonds remain popular among senior citizens. He said the government will reveal the effectiveness of the scheme based on market conditions and investors' response. Mo Sinai, TVB News.
The 6-month grace period for the first phase of the new regulations for disposable plastic products ends today. Several restaurants said some customers would request an extra set of environmentally friendly utensils due to their fragility. This as the Environmental Protection Department believes the community has made its first step towards a plastic-free culture, adding they will be flexible with the implementation of the measure's second phase.
This noodle shop is among a number of restaurants in the city that transitioned from the use of plastic tableware to environmentally friendly items before the start of the government's plastic regulation measure in April. They initially faced challenges such as paper spoons and straws turning soggy just moments after being placed in liquid. But the situation has greatly improved over the last half a year. The upgraded utensils still work even after being soaked in soup. The new paper straws retain their structure when stirring drinks, while prices have also dropped by around 40% compared with before. The noodle shop said 3/4 of its takeaway customers requested environmentally friendly utensils, with the majority of them asking for extra sets. However, the staff member said such requests are a burden to the restaurant, stressing the increase in expenditure for extra utensils and amount of waste generated. Meanwhile, the Environmental Protection Department, or EPD, said a majority of businesses affected by the plastic regulation measure have already found suitable replacements. Kenneth Chang, a deputy director of the EPD, believes Hong Kong has taken its first step towards creating a plastic-free culture. He added there is no strict timetable for the implementation of the second phase of the measure, which restricts the sale of plastic cups, boxes, and bowls for takeout use. The EPD emphasizes considerations will be made in accordance with international trends and whether the replacements work well.
The government plans to introduce 3-day parental leave for civil servants with children under 3 years old, starting in April next year. Around 12,000 civil servants are expected to benefit from the measure. The parental leave is part of the government's policy to encourage more births. Secretary for the Civil Service, Ingrid Yeung, called the measure a new endeavor. Addressing suggestions by some lawmakers that parental leave should be extended to civil servants with older children, Yeung said more consideration is needed. Currently, civil servants are permitted to leave work 2 hours early on Lunar New Year's Eve, Mid-Autumn Festival, the Winter Solstice, as well as Christmas Eve. The International Wine and Spirits Fair will be held at the Hong Kong Convention and Exhibition Center between November 7th and 9th. The Hong Kong Trade Development Council said over 600 exhibitors will participate this year. The council also said the fair is timely because of a recent cut in liquor duty. Mo Sinai was at the preview.
The 3-day wine and spirits fair will gather more than 600 exhibitors from 20 countries and regions, including Italy, South Africa, and Mexico. With the government announcing a slash on liquor tax, some exhibitors from the industry said the cut is a first step in turning Hong Kong into a fine spirits hub.
Like Taiwan, like Macau, even China, they are lower than us. So what is the point in Hong Kong to stand for 100% taxes? Because of the taxes, maybe stop some nice tradings in Hong Kong.
This exhibitor of a tequila booth said the local market for the Mexican beverage is growing, but the adjustment of the duty does not affect him.
My products, we mostly sell into craft cocktail bars. Our price point tends to be below the cutoff for the duty savings. So we're normally importing at below 200 Hong Kong dollars. So most of our range, we won't see any impact. But I think I would like to see the government, reinvigorating the nightlife, finding a way to get back to pre-COVID levels.
The Hong Kong Trade Development Council, the organizer of the event, said more than 20% of exhibitors will bring spirits to the fair. Speaking about the impact of the new liquor tax on the city, the TDC said the measure can create a ripple effect.
I have already understood from some auction house in Hong Kong who gave initial positive feedback about this spirits liquor reduction tax. The reduction of the high-value liquor tax will, of course, build momentum for further steps in trying to refine the Hong Kong as a competitive spirits and wine trading hub.
The final day of the fair will be open to the general public and not just business people who can also sample the alcohol and snacks.
People can try different sakes from this automated tasting system by scanning a token. Memos 9, TVB News.
After the announcement of the Subdivided Flats policy in the latest policy address, there are concerns tenants will have to shoulder more expensive rents. Some concern groups have urged the government to set the initial rent for such tenants. Some residents living in subdivided flats said the details of the policy are unclear, with many fearing the new mandatory standards could cause further inconvenience and the need for extra payment. Some concern groups for subdivided flat residents urged authorities to help facilitate the transition. They suggest the government provide subsidies and transitional accommodation. Hong Kong Express recorded exponential growth in the number of passengers traveling from the Greater Bay Area to the city. The budget airline is confident the number of flights it provides could reach nearly double the level of the pre-pandemic era by the end of this year. Hong Kong Express currently operates 400 flights per week and recorded some 6 million passengers so far this year, an increase of around 55%. 1 in every 4 passengers come from the Greater Bay Area. The airline said flight reservations for the Christmas and Lunar New Year holidays have risen by 30% compared with the same period last year. Still ahead, BRICS summit will commence in Russia tomorrow. Israel is targeting financial institutions in Lebanon in latest attack. And a look at how China's light rail is helping Egypt's modernization. Welcome back. The BRICS summit will be held in the Russian city of Kazan tomorrow. President Xi Jinping will attend and is expected to deliver an important address and meet with Vladimir Putin. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva canceled his trip after suffering a head injury. The 78-year-old will participate in the meeting via video conference. Danny Zhou reports.
With signs and banners of BRICS hanging out in the streets, Kazan is bracing for hosting leaders for the group's 16th annual summit. The meetings will focus on financing, technology and food trade. On the sidelines of the forum, President Xi is expected to hold talks with Russian President Vladimir Putin over the two countries' cooperation in various fields, as well as major regional and global issues. This year's event could set the stage for BRICS' further expansion from the original 5 members: China, Brazil, Russia, India and South Africa. In January, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, Saudi Arabia and United Arab Emirates were added to the emerging economic bloc. The formal announcement will be made during the Kazan summit. More than 30 countries, including Thailand and Malaysia, have applied for membership or expressed an interest in joining. The BRICS nations are expected to discuss alternatives to the US dollar, which they say will allow them to assert their economic independence. Danny Zhou, TVB News.
Israel's targeted banks, which it says are used by Hezbollah in Lebanon. There were several strikes around Lebanon, all with the same aim of destroying the Iran-backed group's financial infrastructure. This building was blown up in southern Beirut. Israel says the Al-Qard Al-Hassan financial institution funds terror activities. The bank is under U.S. and Saudi sanctions, but is used by regular customers. Opposition politicians in Israel welcome the move, saying Iran gives Hezbollah more than $1 billion a year. In Gaza, more than 108 trucks have gone into the enclave. Israel has been under pressure from the U.S. to allow in more food and medicine or risk losing military support. In Cuba, millions are still without power 3 days after a major power plant failure plunged the country into darkness. The blackout has prompted protests, leaving the government searching for answers as a hurricane hits the Caribbean. David Garrett reports.
These protests are difficult to make out in the dark, and that's the point. Angry Cubans rattling and banging pots and pans with the light from the camera the only illumination. Most of the country has been in a blackout for more than 3 days after the grid failed and the largest power station stopped working. More joined the descent from balconies as others came out onto the unlit street. This mother says the government should be charged with child abuse. Schools are shut. People cooked on improvised wooden stoves in the street. Food is rotting without refrigeration. Others prayed for the electricity to come back by candlelight. There have been sporadic resumptions since Thursday, but the unprecedented grid failure has made driving dangerous and the problem has got worse. First, half of the homes were without power. Then it widened to the entire island. The lack of power is a big problem for those in power. The Minister of Energy walked into a room with lights that did work and tried to explain what went wrong and why it will take at least until Tuesday to fix.
Vicente
de la Olevi said things may not be back to normal for days because of a lack of fuel to run the plants. The Cuban government are asking for help from Colombia, Mexico, Russia and Venezuela. Cubans were not entirely convinced when the minister blamed the weather. Oscar, a Category 1 hurricane, is passing over Cuba, hampering restoration. But this rubbish was left by protesters. David Garrett, TVB News.
Moldovans appear to have voted by a razor-thin majority to change their constitution and set a path toward joining the European Union. It looks as though pro-European President Maia Sandu will win. She blamed criminal groups and foreign forces for interfering in Moldova's national interests and undermining democracy. She blames Russian interference, which the Kremlin denies. With 99% of referendum votes counted, Sandu in the yes vote had 50.4%. It was expected to pass more comfortably. Officials are still counting 200,000 ballots from Moldovans who live abroad, but they are expected to vote in favor of EU membership. Defeat for the pro-Western government would be a political disaster. The People's Liberation Army tracked and monitored the passage of 2 foreign warships in the Taiwan Strait. This is just a week after the mainland carried out the Joint Sword 2024B drills in the region. The Foreign Ministry in Beijing said it firmly opposed any country provoking and threatening China's sovereignty and security in the name of freedom of navigation. The U.S. destroyer USS Higgins and the Canadian frigate HMCS Vancouver passed through the Taiwan Strait on Sunday, with the aim of what they call upholding freedom of navigation for all countries. China's Eastern Theater Command said the PLA troops mobilized air and naval forces to closely monitor the ships. They remain on high alert to safeguard China's national sovereignty and security. Britain's King Charles was heckled by a senator during a visit to Australia's parliament, with the protester politician shouting, "You are not my king." It happened after the monarch had delivered a speech where he talked about the benefits of a Commonwealth, Australia as the Commonwealth, and therefore the king as the head of state. The king earlier met politicians, including Prime Minister Anthony Albanese, on his second day visiting Australia. After Charles spoke, a voice could be heard calling out. Those listening in the room looked around to see an Indigenous senator yelling, "Give us our land, give us what you stole."
I didn't get a chance to look around on who was supporting me, but I certainly got a few nods from Aboriginal people in the room to show that they support my resistance, which is the resistance of my people for over 200 years. We'll continue to resist the colony until we have a peacemaking treaty where we can celebrate this country together.
Various sectors in Egypt have seen a surge in Chinese influence in recent years, particularly in the construction of a light rail system in the African nation's new capital city. Locals noted the construction techniques shared by their Chinese counterparts greatly benefit the development of a new generation of Egyptian talent.
Egypt, one of the oldest civilizations in the world, is currently building its new administrative capital. Much of the city is made up of Chinese-built infrastructure, such as the iconic tower, which is the tallest building in Africa. Besides skyscrapers, local residents can now travel between the old capital of Cairo and the new administrative capital via this Chinese-built light rail system. With a length of 70 kilometers and consisting of 12 stations, it is the first such system in the country powered by electricity. Some locals noted the difference from the Cairo metro.
The air conditioning is the best because it's too hot in Egypt.
Addressing the need to travel across the desert, the Chinese light rail was built with special sand prevention functions. Its windows also provide ultraviolet light protection. The top speed is 120 kilometers per hour. Li Kai-chao, deputy manager of the company that built the light rail system, said his company brought China's top technology to Egypt, hoping that local residents can make the most of the kind of advanced transport available in the mainland. The construction of the light rail system also brought about new job opportunities for the Egyptian community, while Chinese technicians share their know-how with their North African counterparts.
Work with the Chinese is not easy because they are working 24 hours and 7 days. Working with Chinese changed me a lot. They have a concept of nothing is impossible.
Timothy Lee, TVB News.
And that's the news. Thanks for watching.